Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the all-new, all-different Mechanical Muse Live. Yep, we've changed things up a bit. We had previously been doing the design journals every week where we talk about what's happening with Cool Name RPG, as you can see on my shirt. Yeah, we've been talking about that, but what we've decided to do is expand our content a little bit so that we can still talk about the design journals, but we can dig into some other stuff that's kind of fun. We're kind of already doing that anyway. This just makes it a little more official, and it goes nicely with our Mechanical Muse Magazine, which you guys may or may not know about, but basically what we're trying to do is create our own sort of reborn version of Dragon. I know some other people are doing this too, but I don't feel like you can have too much cool content like this. So we've been working on this, trying to get it going for a year or two, but now we've dug back into it pretty hardcore and hoping to really make it into something special. So if you're interested in that, you can go check it out over at patreon.com/mechanicalmuse. Now, there are a couple of things that I'm going to be showing you guys today that are pretty cool. I'm going to be able to demonstrate some things that we're working on for Cool Name. We're going to do our usual mail call and all of that sort of stuff. So more of that to come soon. But here, let me go ahead and we'll get started with our usual rundown of things this evening. So let me start out with mail call. Now, I need to take a minute to say Happy Life Day to all of you who celebrate. As you may know, tomorrow is Life Day, a very important day for incredibly hardcore Star Wars nerds who have completely legal copies of the holiday special on their DVD shelf at home. But because it's Life Day, it's appropriate that today's mail call is as awesome as it is, which is a Life Day Chewbacca figure from Hasbro. I mean, honestly, how can you go wrong with that? That's like the most awesome thing ever. So now I've got an actual Life Day Chewbacca figure. It's possible I'll set up a Life Day design and set up on my on my mantle this holiday season. I'm just saying it's possible. If I do, I'll make sure to include some pictures. But Life Day Chewbacca, he's just the greatest. Let's see, what else did I have to talk about? Oh, also on mail call. So you guys might know that I'm a fan of Hero Quest. I've been a fan of Hero Quest since the original one. I absolutely love Hero Quest. And when they came out with the updated version that's got all the actual like physical minis for the doors and everything through Hasbro Pulse, they did like a Kickstarter type of thing. I was all over that because it was awesome. I absolutely love this game. It's super fun. Occasionally you can find it for like $75 on Amazon. And just so you know, no one sponsors this except for me. So there is no sponsorship or anything. This is just me telling you about something I think is cool. But anyway, you can find it sometimes like $75 on Amazon. And it is great. The app is actually really good because it doesn't play the whole game for you, but it lets you, I don't know if you guys remember, but one player had to be Zargon, right? The Zargon, the game master of sorts. Well, the app can take that role on for you. And it's actually really cool. It also is great for solo play. If, for example, your kids don't live in the house anymore and you're just sitting there looking sadly at your game board, now you can pull it out and play like I do. And speaking of mail call, this is something that came in the mail recently. They've got a ton of expansion content already, which is amazing. Spirit Queen's Torment is one of them, and Prophecy of Telor was the other one that showed up. Both of these are pretty cool because they have a whole new adventures and a bunch of cards and more than a dozen minis in each box. And I'm a sucker for minis every single time. But they've got like 4 of these or 5 of these out already. So it's definitely very cool. It's a lot of fun. Very simple, right? It's not really hardcore. We're not talking like Gloomhaven level depth or anything, but it's a great game to just sit down and play. Now, if the Hero Quest designers are listening to me, I think it's Quest 6 where all your stuff gets stolen and you end up back in the dungeon alone. That level's impossible. You lose all your stuff and your characters die. It is not what I call fun. So just warning you guys, be careful of that level if you play it. But other than that, it's a whole lot of fun. Another thing that I want to talk about are cool shows and books and things that we found. And one of the things that I just finished watching was Blue Eye Samurai on Netflix. Blue Eye Samurai was awesome. All right. It was a really cool show. This is a show that was made by the screenwriter for Logan, a guy named Michael Green, and his wife, Amber Noizumi. And it is kind of a little bit of, it's an adult show, first off. It's not for not for everyone's kids. watch it yourself, decide if it's for your kids before you watch it. There's a fair amount of nudity. There's lots of gore because we're talking about, cool samurai fights. But it has a little bit of a vibe of Samurai Jack, but with a more deeply human, rich story. If anything, it reminds me a little of Frank Miller's Ronin comic. If you've ever read that, it's just got this richness to the characters that I did not expect. And of course, it's all just tossed in with a ton of really great sword fighting and martial arts. And I mean, that's a blast too. It's got a kind of a comic book vibe. But yeah, definitely check it out. It's worth watching. A little bit disappointed by the last episode. Would have liked them to end it a little bit different, but that's just me. We'll see. It was also good. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt and hoping that we get a second season to see where this goes. So yeah, really, really, really good. Love that. So that's it for mail call and new things to talk about today. So what are we going to talk about? Well, we've got a couple of things that I'm going to go through. I almost forgot. Game night update. We're still playing Massive Darkness, and cool name, but we're still playing Massive Darkness on our normal game night. And we just got to the boss battle with the Archangel Gabriel, or with Michael. I don't know how this is going to end. We stopped last week right as we got into the room. So for those of you who have played Massive Darkness, no spoilers for me, but let me know how you did against the Archangel when you got to that boss fight, because I'm curious to see how others. I did want to share one piece of advice. So if you're playing Massive Darkness 2, something that happened to us, so we kept pulling out these legendary cards, which are the best equipment you can get in the game. And every time it was like Bard only, Tinker only, Necromancer only. And we're getting all this stuff that we just can't do anything with. Well, we've discovered after the fact that if you get a class only item that isn't for one of the classes you're playing, you're supposed to skip it and draw another one. So I'm helping you guys out. Don't make the same mistake we did if you're playing Massive Darkness 2. Make sure that you watch out for that. All right, so what are we going to talk about tonight? I'm going to talk a little bit about Cool Name RPG. We're going to talk about a design journal. I'm also going to be talking a little bit about the world of Aetaltis and specifically Dunbury Castle, which was the topic of one of our posts this month over on Mechanical Muse Magazine. So that's why I wanted to go into a little bit of discussion about Dunbury Castle. So let me start by talking about Cool Name. As you guys know, playtesting is underway for version 0.03. Now, starting tomorrow, that's going to be available to everyone, okay? Initially, for the first week, it was only available to the backers. We also have late pledging, which I should have brought that link up. I'll post it afterwards. But the thing about it is that we sent it out to our backers first to try, and now we're going to send it out to a larger audience. We've also sent copies of version 0.03 to every single person, every single one of our consulting designers. Now, as you guys might know, let me just go back a little bit for some of you who maybe are watching this for the first time because you're into some of the Mechanical Muse Magazine bits. But just want to point out that Cool Name RPG is an effort on our part to build a brand new game system from the ground up. We started from zero when we started this process earlier this year. Build it from the ground up and give it away to the world for free. And by free, we mean free for anyone to do anything with. They can make it into a video game. They can make their own version. They can just rewrite all the rules and post their own game. It doesn't matter to us. We just don't want people to feel bound by anything, so they never feel like, is something going to happen? Are they going to take this away? Am I going to lose my rights at some point? You're not. And that's what this is all about. And so for this, what we ended up doing was pulling together a dozen amazing designers, guys like Matt Forbeck, who designed the Marvel role-playing game that's out right now. Also Robin Laws, Ken Height. We also have folks like Eloy Lasanta, who teaches a class at Central Michigan on game design. We've got folks like Toya K. Finley, and she is amazing. She does narrative design for games. And just an amazing group of people that we were able to draw on to get a whole lot of great feedback. I'm leaving them out. I want to mention all of them. DBJ, Stephen Long of Hero Games, tons of great people involved in this. And so what we do is we send them the texts, and we say, what do you think? What can we do better? What are we doing wrong? What pitfalls do you see that we might fall into here that you as professionals who've been doing this for years know that we need to be careful about? So at any rate, we're testing version 0.03. We're going to be posting that publicly tomorrow, and I'll be sending out some notices about that. And I did tonight, though, want to talk a little bit about some of the feedback we already received. So Robin Laws is one of the folks who provided us with feedback, and it was spot on. I'm going to share some of that with you guys tonight and just sort of like go through some of his comments. So one of the questions we asked our consulting designers is we said, look, coordination right now determines how easy it is to dodge things. It determines your initiative. It determines how easy it is to hit things. We're a little nervous that coordination is pretty heavy in terms of what it's being used for right now. And so we really are trying to take a look at whether or not we need to make a change there. Now, Robin agreed. He said, yeah, this is totally a valid concern. There are all sorts of players who will look for overvalued stats, right? And that's where they will cash in all of their points to make sure that they do that. So what we want to do, though, is at the same time, there is the importance of non-combat gaming, which is going to be a big part of Cool Name RPG. And so that does balance it out a little bit. But he agreed that we might want to look at different ways we can do it. Now, one of the ideas that came up in the Discord channel, which if you're not part of the Discord channel, visit coolnamerpg.com and you can find all the links to the Discord and to the late pledging and everything else. But one of the things that came up was like maybe block is toughness, parry is strength, and dodge is coordination. You know, we could do something like that. So I think there's some things that we can do to maybe tweak it a little bit so that it's a little better balanced as we go through with this. And so that was one of the things. Another thing that we asked about was that we have a pretty tight range of ability scores right now, right? We're looking at like nothing really higher than a 5 for a player character in as an MO or as an attribute or one of their skills or things, right? So the whole thing is that what Robin pointed out is that really it's a matter of trade-offs, and it happens with every single system, right? He suggested that a course, sort of a tight scale, works well with our emphasis on modifiers, because we have this whole system of add +1 to the difficulty, add +1 to the action score. We have this system here, and he suggested to us that, yeah, we're probably in the right place on that. You know, at the other hand, I brought up the thing of like, what do you do when you have a cat or something? He said that generally they're minor. The best way, I love how he put it. He goes, those are minor threats. They're stupid and annoying, and you shouldn't design your scale around them, which was really, spot on advice. I mean, honestly, he couldn't be more correct on that. When he said it, I just sat there going like, yeah, that is absolutely right. I'm not sure why that wasn't like instantly obvious to me as I was going through with this. So, all right, now I'm going to check something here. I'm a little bit worried that my YouTube is not still streaming, so I'm trying to take a look here. So if you guys will forgive me for just a second, we're doing a lot of new stuff here tonight, all at the same time, and so there might be some challenges. So I'm just going to double check here. And yes, we are still live. So good news. Thank you for my patience. I appreciate that, folks. So let me keep going here. So talking a little more about Robin's advice. So yeah, that advice that we don't want to sit there and have a whole system designed around the little annoying pests that don't really add to the story. It's obvious when he says it, right? Totally obvious when he says it. So now one of the things that he brought up and Steve Long brought up is that the action table starts out linear, which is you have a D6, D8, D10, D12, and then it becomes a bell curve, 2D6, D6 plus D8, D6 plus D10. So he pointed out that at that point, it becomes really, really hard for anyone who's not like a human computer to guess what their odds are. And I think that's a valid point. It's been brought up a few times. I've asked folks what they think about it. I've asked Steve Long, for example, to give me his thoughts on, could we fix that? What could we do differently, right? At the same time, one thing he did point out was that one of the things that is cool is the whole business of grabbing different dice is actually fun game mechanic. And that's what we've heard from our backers as well. The people who are playtesting are like, that's fun. I do like it. So we're going to have to figure out and sort of, we need to consider whether or not we're on the right track with this. And so I'm probably going to bring in someone who's a statistical mathematician. So if you know anyone, tell me. Otherwise, I'm going to look around because I know a few people and have them help us run these numbers. I mean, as you know, we've run the numbers. We've got all the math built into the background. So we know precisely what every change creates in terms of statistics. We just need to make sure that it's okay, right? All right, so that was one of the things he talked about. He also noted some of the things that we asked for feedback on, right? One of the things we wanted to know about was that whole +1 modifier system, you know, where it's add +1 only, nothing counts as +2 or +3. He did say that, yeah, we could make it work where an inhospitable environment, you can break all of the different pieces of impact, all the different environmental factors into small +1 bonuses or modifiers to your difficulty score. He does know, he also, though, talked to me a little bit about the mod hunters, right? We've talked about this, folks who just spend way too much time looking for every little thing. So, and to figure out how they can pick at it. You know, there are some things that you can do. And some of these are a little bit meta, right? So you can only have 3 modifiers, or you can only use a given modifier once per session. This is kind of cool because it does encourage creative thinking and different ways to tackle the problems at hand. So yeah, we're going to have to sort of figure out what's happening there. Now, one of the things that came up was defense scores. I've been asking whether or not monsters should have dodge, parry, block. His opinion is that for our core system, that we're trying to achieve this goal of this simple, fast game, that we really want to keep it as simple as possible. And that a defense score for monsters is probably plenty for what we want to do. Now, one thing he did bring up is he doesn't like the terminology, or I wouldn't say he doesn't like it. He had concerns about the terminology because we're using like action score and action table and base difficulty score and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. It sounds like we probably can think about a better way to do this. And I think we might want to try to work on that. So again, when I'm telling you guys all this, part of what I'm saying is drop by the Discord, jump in and tell us what you think. I want to hear what you guys have to think about these things if you have ideas. And some of you have already been posting some really great stuff along these lines. Along those lines, and this isn't part of his feedback, but we're talking about those scores like creativity, presence, and awareness. We're debating what they should be called: intuitive, inherent, you know, we're not quite sure what to call those. So join us in the discussion on Discord. We're working through those and trying to figure out some good names for those things, right? So now one of the things is that it's a little bit difficult to do the business where you're adding the difficulty score or the action score. I like the simplicity of it. On one hand, it feels very simple. On the other hand, it can get pretty complicated during the game. And we actually saw this when we first tried to do an on-air play test with me and Matt Eberly. We were trying to do an on-air play test, and all of a sudden we're adding stuff to the wrong numbers, and we're subtracting from the action score. We're supposed to be adding to the difficulty score. We might need to simplify that, folks. So it's another thing that we're going to be looking you for to hear what you think about that as well. But he did say is that the core mechanic overall does work, right? It works. You get to roll some different dice combinations, which is fun. And yet it's not too far off from what people are used to in games, but it is a different sort of new feel. And that's one of the things that is super important on this, right? Super important that we give people a different experience. If we're just reskinning 5e, it doesn't do anyone any good at all, right? 5e is already out there. So that's actually really cool. He also talked a little bit about attributes and where the dump stat's going to end up being. He's guessing creativity today. I think part of that is going to be for us to make creativity valuable, to have a better way of describing the importance of it. For me, one of the big ways I see creativity coming into play is when you are trying to figure out something, but you're not quite sure how to put together the pieces. And that's where I see an opportunity to have rules for putting the pieces together during the gameplay and using your creativity attribute to do that. Also, he talked a little bit about vitality. Just again, we need to do a little bit better job of describing how it works and how it works and what you're supposed to do with it. He also noted that he was missing some MOs he wanted to see, like barbarian or paladin or ninja. I don't think that we probably did a very good way to describe combining to create those, but I'm starting to wonder whether we should, right? Should we just make them? Like he said, they don't take up very much space, at least at this point, right? So maybe we just make them, make a bunch. You know, that was one of the discussions on Discord as well. Do we want to have lots of MOs to choose from? We don't want it to be overload for people, but at the same time, I don't know that it's a bad thing to say, look, let's just have a whole bunch of really cool MOs that you can choose from. Pick that character that you want to play and then tweak them even further to make them your character, right? Your story, which I think is really great. He made a great point about non-lethal damage. Oh my God, I don't even know why I didn't think of this. He said, don't make it harder not to kill people. And every game I play does that, which is why I made it harder to use non-lethal damage with a lethal weapon. He said, just don't do that. It's just let people do it. And there's nothing wrong with that. It adds to the story and creates a cool approach to things. So I think we're going to probably take that out. And then he also said that movement, because of the way the whole game fits together, we definitely want to keep it in a simple way of moving. We don't want to get too far into the weeds on things. Now, not saying we won't get into the weeds on this stuff when we get into some of the rules modules, but at least for now, and especially for the core rules, we want to keep it simple, right? The last thing that we're going to talk about is that, well, first, vitality, wounds, and healing. He said it's about as complicated as we want to get, not much more complicated, but we'll want a quick reference for it. Great point there. And then he talked about weapons, and he kind of hit on exactly the thing that I was hoping for, which is that he talked about how weapons don't need to have a broad range of differences in terms of their modifiers. Instead, you create cool ways to use those weapons. Like a dagger has +1 action score in a confined space, or short sword has +1 if you have initiative over your opponent. This is the sort of stuff that I'm really excited about, because for me, part of this is going to be about allowing people tons of creative tools to build cool things, right? Let's say you build a kukri. What makes it different from a short sword or a long dagger? That's the sort of thing that I want people to be able to do. And so that's really important to me. So I got to say that across the board, the feedback was excellent. It was really, really great. It was really good to hear from them on all of that. And so I'm glad that we're able to get that feedback, and I'm looking forward to sharing more of that with you guys as we go along. And when we hear back from even more, we've heard back from some of our other consulting designers. I just can't do everything in one night here. So I had to keep it pretty simple. So what I do want to show you next, though, is something fairly interesting. This right now is built into the Ataltis site. So you're not going to see any cool name RPG stuff here yet. But we have been experimenting with tools to build that wiki that we promised you guys. Remember back when we did the Kickstarter, way back in the ancient days of old, we talked about setting up a wiki as one of our stretch goals with all the rules in it. Well, we're doing that. And so I'm going to show you the bare bones version of this. This is not open and out there yet. It's at the very bare minimum, but it at least lets you see how this is set up, where you can set up different books, different lists of information. Once you get in there, you can actually get to a set of contents for the page, and you can also see the entire book table of contents down the side, which is cool. And then the other thing here that I love is this: pop-ups for spells, pop-ups for monsters. As we're going through and we're creating new content for Cool Name, this is going to be incredibly valuable. So we've been experimenting using Ataltis because we got a lot of Ataltis content to work with, and it gives us something to build on. But we are relatively soon going to be putting this out there for you guys to use as part of Cool Name RPG. And so I'm really excited to share that with you guys and let you know that we're making good on yet another one of our promises as we go through this. So there'll be more to see as we go along. We'll share more with you guys as we go along here, and as we build more stuff and we start expanding this and sort of polishing this a bit. But this is great work. Hat tip to Matt Eberly for finding this tool. It's incredibly cool. He built out some basics for us so we could start looking at it. So yeah, it should be very fun to have this for you guys and get this thing out there. So we discussed, do we put it out right away with the cool name rules in playtest format? And we decided we probably should put it out in playtest format. If nothing else, what we can do is we're looking at, can we set it up so that backers are able to make comments on the pages so that you can actually go straight in and comment while you're playtesting? So that's one of the things that we're working on today. And I'm very excited about that and getting that for all of you. So other cool name news. Last bit of cool name news for you is I am currently on the hunt for our IP lawyer. We have struggled to find somebody who is like an expert on Creative Commons. If you know someone, pass them their name along to us. But that's the big thing right now. We are leaning towards a Creative Commons license. And here's why. The Creative Commons license is already a viable way to share content and to share it with very specific sets of rules to ensure that people aren't limited. The thing about it is it will never be owned by a game company. This license won't. It'll never be owned by a profit-focused third party. These licenses exist specifically in a nonprofit today for the sharing of content, just like we want to do. And so from that perspective, we're probably not going to lean towards any other type of license, not to write our own and reinvent the wheel, not to jump onto one of the other ones that are out there. I know there are some and they're cool, but we believe we can do what we want with a Creative Commons license. Now, you may know a little bit about Creative Commons, but understand that there's a whole variety of Creative Commons licenses available. These give all different levels of sharing permissions. Our goal is going to be that the core information that we release is completely usable by anyone, but what you build belongs to you. All right. That's where I think the trick is going to be, because people are going to say, well, do they really own the stuff that they used from there? The answer is no, because someone could go use it from there, but use it from the free area, not from the thing other people created. Because here's the reality is that if people can't make some money building these things, they're not going to be able to build them. I mean, yeah, fan stuff is awesome, and there'll be a lot of that. But if we want to see companies actually embrace this and build it, they're going to have to pay the bills. And so we need to give them a good way to do that so that they can produce their content without having any worries about it. And so that's exactly what we're shooting for. It'll mean that all of the stuff that we put out as part of Cool Name RPG will be free, including the art and everything else that's in there. But then people can build their own things and maintain ownership of them. So that'll be pretty cool. All right. Well, we are almost at the 8:30 mark, and I have one last thing to talk about tonight. I may take a little less time on it than I was going to, but I just want to talk a minute about Dunbury Castle, which is an incredible, I mean, it's our book, so obviously I think it's incredible. But part of what I love about it is Dave Gross wrote this. Dave worked for Dragon Magazine as editor. He is a longtime game designer. He's excellent at what he does, and he's a great writer. He's written some fantastic stories. And Dunbury Castle is something that he wrote for us. When we found out we had too much to do by ourselves, we talked to Dave, and he came in and wrote this. It's an amazing book. And so let me tell you a little bit about what this is. This isn't just an advertisement. Part of the reason I'm talking about it is that as Mechanical Muse, we want to be able to talk to the folks who are playing World of Aetaltis and offer them some information as well. And we think that this is a good way for us to do it through Mechanical Muse Magazine. So what we want to do is I want to tell you a little bit about what Dunbury Castle is. Dunbury Castle is a location set in the Northern Wilds. It is on the very edge of civilization. And if it sounds suspiciously like Keep on the Borderlands, that is not a bad comparison. There are a lot of similarities there. I've always felt that Keep on the Borderlands, along with the village of Hamlet, for example, are a couple of key adventure starters, right? We have the Thornwall, the village of Thornwall that we created, but we also then have Dunbury Castle, because you want to have this sort of fortress, this bastion of order in a world of chaos, a place where the heroes can safely rest and come back and build up their strength to go back out into the wilds. At the same time, you need to have enough stuff out there for them to explore and discover. And so that's what Dunbury Castle is all about. It's about creating this safe point that players can leave from, go out into the wilds and explore, and then come back. So I'm going to show you just a little bit about what we have in here. And part of the reason why we have it, to give you some ideas on how you can use this or something similar in your own games. So one of the first things that I want to talk about here is, I'm going to skip the overview, the timeline, all that good stuff. Lots here that you guys can take a look at. Military life. Now, one of the reasons that this is interesting to me is that I wanted to have a chapter that talked about what if you want to play a soldier. Now, this is always a tricky thing in role-playing games, in my opinion, because you've got this whole command structure, right? Where it's like you got to take orders, and you got to do what you're told. And that kind of flies in the face of normal adventuring. And it can maybe bog down a game if it's not really the way that you want it to go. And so what we do with military life is we take the idea of a military role and we offer different ways that you can play it so that you can be a little more autonomous in the work that you're doing. And so when you take a look at this, you'll see that there are opportunities to go out, to explore, to choose the adventures that you're going for, to be almost a special forces, or to be sort of a add-on, adjunct group that's working with the castle. Lots of opportunities to do those things as you're going through. But we also talk a little bit about what the castle routine is like. And a lot of this stuff comes from history. It looks at different roles that you could have: enlisted soldiers versus freelancers versus civilian guests. And it tells like what the differences are for you there. It also tells you what it's like if you're living the enlisted life, and gives you ideas on how you can still keep the military aspect there, but continuing to have the fun there. So we give a whole section on following orders. So there are some things you can do. A couple of the examples we give here is field autonomy, where you have a commander, Captain Braithwaite, who really believes in the intelligence of her soldiers. And so for that reason, she says, look, when you're in the field, you're in charge of your destiny. I trust you to make the right decisions. I trust you to do the right things for the people of the region, for the skier. There's also the opportunity, if you want to take sort of a different approach, is maybe there's a little bit of a lax attitude towards discipline at this castle. Maybe Captain Braithwaite is so busy with the big things that she doesn't care about really what's going on down below, as long as you don't get into too much trouble, right? So it's another way that you could have a military adventure and yet still have the freedom to do what you want. And then, of course, finally, there's the Dunbury Irregulars, where you're sort of these irregular troops, right? The freelancers, the mercenaries of sorts. Now, of course, the trick there is that generally the irregulars are not really smiled upon by the rest of the enlisted soldiers. So that can become a story in itself. So again, just some cool ways that you can bring in this whole military concept, even to the point of saying like castle duty, and how do you make the boring things into an adventure of its own. And boring by like the boring work a day, not boring stuff in the game, but like, yay, I got to clean the kitchen. Yay. There are ways here that you can make this into an adventure, and it can be fun. So a lot of cool stuff there that can take you there. Lieutenant Janny Vance, there's a question whether Lieutenant Janny Vance, who you'll meet shortly, is single. I can neither confirm or deny rumors that she is not single. So sorry for the bad news on that one. Anyway, when you go through this book, though, it, of course, has got stats for the castle. It's got stats for all the land around it, including a lot of different adventure hooks that you can use to bring out your adventure, because it's not a whole adventure in itself. It's really a base of operations for you to run your adventures from, right? You can drop any module into the wilds and then use this to come back to. And again, I want to reinforce the importance of having a safe place for players to come back to. If players never feel safe, they are constantly wasting time on things like paranoid trap setting and alarm building and refusing to sleep and all sorts of things like this. By giving them a safe place they can come back to, guaranteeing them that it's safe out of character, flat out telling them that it's a safe place for their characters, it allows you to stay focused on the fun of the adventure itself and not be worried about those things that are just not really that fun to play in the game. Only reason I brought this page up here is because I feel like Russell Marx's Green Hag is an incredible picture. Russell, by the way, is also the guy doing the art for Cool Name RPG, but just a fantastic piece of art and one of my favorites, and I'm just showing it to you because I like it. So anyway, I'm going to jump here to show you one other thing. Another piece about this is you'll notice that the town of Thornwall is also listed here. So Thornwall is important because that's another book that we have. But Thornwall is sort of the town, the initial starting town location. So if you want to start in a castle, you've got Dunbury. But if you want to start in more of a town, you've got Thornwall. And these two places are connected together. They're on the same map. They're within walking distance of one another. And it allows you to sort of slowly expand your adventure area. Because as a GM, what I like to do to avoid people being overwhelmed, especially when you take a big world like Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms or Etaltis, people look at it and go like, oh my God, I don't have time to study world geography of a fantasy world. I just want to play. By creating something like Dunbury or Thornwall and using a tool like that in your game, you can give people the opportunity to slowly discover the world on their own over time. It allows them to have a very focused space to begin with without too many outside influences. And then you slowly can expand it from there. It allows them to learn little bits about the world at a time. They don't need to learn everything at once. And even if the player's learning it, you can always pretend the character already knew that as the player learns it. But again, it's a great way to start a game so that your players don't feel overwhelmed by the color text, by the books, by the background of this world and story that you're putting them into. So again, just a piece of advice from my own gaming that I think is great, whether you're using the village of Hamlet or the town of Thornwall or something else completely, totally up to you, but it's a great way to get started so you don't have too many things going in at once and let people slowly acclimate to the new setting. All right, the last thing I wanted to show you are just the people of Dunbury Castle. One of the things that we like to have is sort of in the background, sort of a not necessarily a villain, but an antagonist who you can use as a GM to make things difficult for the players, not through direct confrontation, but through their machinations. And that's what Warden Oswald Bailwick is all about. And so Warden is in here as well, but I think it's a cool way that you can create richness in your story without having to have a solid confrontation every single time. And the other thing is that if you have a direct confrontation, there's a good chance your players will kill that villain, whether they mean to or not, and you think they can, they'll probably kill them anyway, and all of a sudden your villain's gone. By having someone who's at a distance and manipulating things from a distance, it allows you to have this ongoing villain, this ongoing antagonist who constantly comes back to plague them with the things that they're doing. And eventually you can have that big confrontation, but at least to begin with, it gives you a villain that can come back story after story and create a great narrative around your adventures. Of course, Captain Alaris Braithwaite is who we were talking about before. She's the one who's in charge of the castle, and Lieutenant Janny Vance is her number one, right? So Vance is awesome. Partly I'm showing this because this is one of my favorite warrior pictures ever. I think it's super cool. But also because Melanie asked about Lieutenant Vance. So yeah. One thing that Melanie was just saying is she had a ton of fun leading a game with the warder's machinations, that the little details that kept coming back. And yeah, that's absolutely true, right? It's so much fun to have those little things going on. And the other thing, here's another secret for GM. So if you're a player, plug your ears or something. When the players assume, because they're starting to get a little bit suspicious, that something is the bad guys doing, don't hesitate to make it the bad guys doing, even if it wasn't before, because all of a sudden it makes them feel incredibly intelligent because they solved the puzzle, and it makes you seem incredibly intelligent, like you planted all of these seeds way in advance. So a little bit of GM advice on how to work your way through that and utilize that to your best interest and make you look good in the game and have everyone have a really good time. Well, folks, that's it. We've wiled away another hour of fun. We'll be back next week with episode 2. We have a bunch more things that we're going to be talking about. I don't have the whole rundown yet, but we'll be posting that later. For those of you who aren't backers, well, you should be backers of Cool Name. It's awesome. But if you're not, that's going to be, the rules will be going out tomorrow to those folks, so they'll be able to take a look at it. Also, we'll be getting that wiki set up. And for those of you who are subscribers to Mechanical Muse Magazine, allow me to be the first to tell you that we have plans for you that involve an online database of Etaltis material that you will have access to as a subscriber to Mechanical Muse Magazine in our Patreon. So keep that in mind, that we've got a little something coming for you guys that's going to be kind of cool add-on to what you're already getting. Well, that's it for tonight, folks. Thank you very much for joining, and I will see all of you next week.